All right, we will move on to item number 5, the Lane 4 pre-development agreement.
It's a very standard document, things that we've done before with other developers. It doesn't commit us to using eminent domain. In fact, it says we will not use eminent domain to help them assemble any parcels of land together. The city does own some of the property in this district. As you know, we purchased the Neff printing site. So we do have a little bit of control over the land if they'd like to approach us for plans to assemble our land with theirs. That's something we said we would be willing to discuss with them further. At the end of the 6 months, or perhaps the year, depending on how long it takes them to put a plan together, they would need to come back to you with a final development agreement, another document like this with a lot more detail in it about exactly what their development plan is. And then, of course, if they're pursuing any TIF or CID, they need to go through the TIF and CID process with you too. And that's the point at which you evaluate, how much value there is in making those agreements.
That is a great setup. Questions for Danielle from the committee? And Jeff, I don't know, do you want to add anything to?
No, just thank you for your support so far of our Mission Crossing project. It's gotten off to a great start. It has given us the confidence. We've always said that we like infill redevelopment projects. The success of that one and the relationships that we've built with the city and the staff during that process have given us the confidence to try to take on something of a larger scope in the city of Mission.
Well, I appreciate the way you guys have done it. I think you've been great for the city. I like the way that project came together. I think it looks great. There's tremendous energy up there, and I know you're not even halfway done with getting it constructed. So I personally am a big fan and in favor of this pre-development agreement. I'm glad the city of Mission is at the top, is on your radar screen.
Yeah, we're a big fan of the area and the city of Mission. So.
That's fantastic. Questions from the committee, either for Danielle or for Plainfield?
So one of my first questions is, was there a pre-development agreement before that other property? It was the same thing you did then? Okay.
The only difference would be they owned all of the property in that boundary, so we had a pre-development agreement for them and their property. This is their property.
We weren't holding any property back from anybody else,
right?
Which is what this is proposing.
This is proposing that if someone else in this district came to us asking for TIF or CID, that we would wait 6 months before we would grant that. It doesn't hold anybody back from proposing it, it just holds us back from you guys pulling the trigger and actually offering TIF or CID to someone else in this district. So we don't think there's a great likelihood that there's anybody else in this district interested in doing that at this time.
So could another developer come in and just buy the property without a TIF or CID?
Sure.
So this pre-development agreement doesn't preclude anybody else from coming out?
We can't stop somebody from selling private property to somebody else.
Still believe in the American way, don't we?
Right. And there's no promise from the developer to give us a payment for holding back the TIF and the CID?
Nope, there's no money.
I understand what they're getting from it is it doesn't hurt the city in any way. It doesn't really help the city in any way. It's just a neutral agreement.
Right. It's to
not do anything.
It's a good faith agreement that you're interested in redevelopment and you're encouraging them to proceed.
So just a clarifying point on Jennifer's question, if somebody came in and wanted to develop, but they wanted a TIF or CID and they were ready to cut ground tomorrow, break ground tomorrow, then that does harm us because we can't talk with them or work through giving them CID or TIF.
If the exact language is that you could not otherwise grant development incentives, it doesn't mean you couldn't explore them, although that I don't think is what they would like you to do, but you couldn't actually agree to, as you know, TIF and CID is a multi-month process of public hearings and notices and then understanding what the development plans are. So 6 months isn't a long time, but if somebody were ready today, yes, it would impede them for the 6 months.
So then that leads me to the question as to why is there a need for this pre-development agreement if TIF and CID take several months?
Well, I'll take a shot at that one and then I'll turn it over to Jeff. Here's what happens is that when you look at the development area that is being proposed, and what ends up happening is if you've got two developers, this is the way I understand it, if you have two developers that are trying to develop the same, you get the market out of balance in a hurry. And you're looking to, one, identify with a developer who has a proven track record, who is stable, and somebody that hopefully you've had a relationship with. And given that they're looking at a significant chunk of land, the more parcels and more properties that they can put together, the more dynamic of a development that they ultimately can build, the greater benefit to the city in terms of not only sticking with the form-based code and adding green space and density, but all the other ancillary things that would come from that. So I'm no developer, but that's the way I see it. Jeff, Corb, what would you add to that?
I would like to add that there are benefits, I think, of the arrangement both to the city and to the developer. Here's how I put them. Assemblages are very difficult. Just like herding cats, trying to get multiple landowners to sell at the same time and things like that. They're one of those difficult projects we can undertake. And as developers, we're not on salaries, we don't have stipends. All we have is our time. And so we're going to allocate our time to projects that we think can succeed. If we don't think that we can control this herd of cats, or this herding of cats in some manner, we can't spend the time on trying to assemble such a difficult and complex project. So all we're asking for is some, beyond just the cost of architects and attorneys and stuff like that, let's make it worth the time to try to undertake this complex of a project. And in return, what's the benefit for the city for that? I will tell you that herding of cats, not many people will undertake that, and I don't know anybody who will undertake it without some sense that they're going to have some protection during the time that they're trying to do that difficult project.
And I would also add, I think there is one thing of what is the value to the city. The value to the city is having a very quality developer that's produced in the past come forward and spend money on attorneys, architects, engineers, and others to actually take what started as a form-based code and actually put on real-life buildings. How does it work? Work with your engineering department, work with your public works department. How do you do the connections? How does the infrastructure work? How do all these things happen where in essence, even if we fail, right, but we've spent that time and we've spent that effort and we've brought those plans in to Martin and Danielle and they've seen them and Mike has seen numbers on what projects look like and how they all work. There's been huge value created for the city that you guys now have all of that information and all of that sense of how the private market looks at a deal, that you can apply that knowledge on a future deal out there. So it's actually, we are in our act of struggling and working out there, we're providing value to you through just that process of going through it. So we're asking for this small bit of consideration for that time. Does this stop actually any other developer from coming in and planning? No. Does this stop any landowner from going and trying to do other deals? No. It's actually one of the lightest or weakest tools that is out there, but it's the tool that legally sort of allows us to get forward and start the process to start spending what can honestly be hundreds of thousands of dollars in pre-planning efforts. We've done it once, it was extremely successful. I think these are the guys that are not just doing it in Mission, but are doing it in places like Wyandotte County with 39 Rainbow. I mean, they are putting up buildings and doing hard infill sites. And we have used this process very effectively, not just here, but in other places, and would ask for your consideration of that.
Debbie, Pat, Amy, other questions? Danielle or Lane 4?
Have any other cities near us in Johnson County entered into comparable agreements, and what have been the good and bad points of those?
I don't know of other cities, but this is a fairly standard agreement, and you've entered into them in the past for things like some of the local businesses on Johnson Drive, the Cap Fed Bank. It's a very common, just exploratory tool for developers to use.
And this would go into effect when?
Well, you guys would be considering it this month, and it would go into effect.
Any comments from anyone not on the committee?
It would, in 6 months, there will be something definite and specific.
In 6 months, there'll be a lot of conversation that happens, and if there's not something definite and specific, then you guys have the ability to terminate.
You got it.
Do we have to vote on renewing it, or is it an auto renewal clause?
It's an automatic renewal after the first 6 months, if they've made their due diligence, if they made progress.
But we can always terminate.
We just have to remember
But
terminate.
the renewal is for what, another 6
Another 6 months, so it's a year.
Yeah, you gotta remember that stuff.
Just reminded me.
Put that in your calendar, Pat.
I would just like to say that I think it's great. I'm excited to see somebody even interested in Keystone's property. I think it's wonderful, and go.
Lawrence? I agree with you, Susan.
It's cool. Could we put those, it's voted every 6 months, just to...
Yeah, have it terminate, not auto-renew.
Yeah, just to revote and see what they come up with in 6 months?
I think Lawrence made the best point. We can terminate it anytime we want
This-
to.
For council members that have been through this before, we're not going to, if we forget about this, shame on us. But nonetheless, I think what's been said is well covered this topic. One thing that hasn't been said is, in terms of redevelopment, this is relatively a small net that we're casting here. I mean, it may look big to us, but we're not. It's not like we're blanketing the entire city with this redevelopment agreement or this preliminary redevelopment agreement. There clearly is risk on the developer to go out there and spend time trying to do this. So I recognize that, and I want to support the risk that the developers want to make on our behalf, a developer that I trust. Two things. This is the way to move forward on redevelopment. If you want to redevelop your city, which will increase your tax base, which will make the budget discussions easier in the future, this is the way forward to do these types of redevelopment agreements. I would assume, having been through these processes enough times, that if there was someone interested, seriously interested in this piece of property, that we would know about it. It's not like there's someone all of a sudden tomorrow going to show up on our door and be seriously interested. They typically contact staff way in advance before they're seriously interested. So I'm trusting the staff. If staff knew of someone that was seriously interested, that would be part of full disclosure of this process. The second thing I'm trusting of staff is that they have had conversations with Lane 4 about our form-based code. I know Lane 4 is familiar with it, and that this agreement would not be put before us if Lane 4 wasn't serious about trying to redevelop in the spirit of that. Because the last thing I'd want to see is for us to waste time with the developer who wants to go this way when the city says we want to go this way. So I'm trusting all that's been put in place. I'm not on the committee, but I do support this type of very common agreement.
Thank you. Lawrence,
Question on the packet is that I noticed there's a red rectangle around the map, and I'm assuming those two blocks are what's in this pre-development agreement, but then there's some green shading and some gray shading. I don't understand.
I think that was background layers. I didn't
Okay.
make this map, but I don't think it's relevant.
But the red line is
That's the red line.
map we're talking, okay.
Because the red line doesn't currently, based on as I understand the map, go around.
I had not heard that, so we'll follow up before it gets to the next stage.
All right, and then we'll clarify that when we take a vote at City Council. All right. All right, enough discussion, looking for a recommendation.
So
Go.
recommend.
Mr. Quinn? Dana? All right, 4-0. Well, let's not put this on the consent agenda. We'll talk about this.
Okay.
This is good news.